person that sits at the top, they don't care how many people fight over each other to get your infrastructure compromised, because at the end of the day, they're still getting a percentage of it.
Just like you and I might have a subscription to Microsoft Office or AWS, you could subscribe to a fraudster service, right? As a regular everyday criminal with a laptop.
I learned a long time ago that not change management from a technical perspective, but organizational change management is really important.
The whole industry, but particularly in the mortgage world, there's risks that if you don't address them the first time, the water's out of the tub. It's a real problem.
I'm a firm believer in never, ever, ever try to skirt evidence that you provide in an audit.
Hello and welcome to BetterTech, our podcast today. I'm hosting Jocelyn Houle from BetterTech. Art Harvey, the CISO of Dovenmule, is here with us today to talk a little bit about his unusual path to being a CISO and some of the special tactics he's taken to create a culture of security at Dovenmule. Welcome, Art.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Appreciate it.
It's great to meet you. I do want to talk a little bit about your path to getting to be a CISO, because that role is a complicated role and it may be changing right now. But before we do that, let's just kind of level set a little bit. Can you tell me what Dovenmule does?
Yeah, we're a mortgaging subservicer. So let's say the larger mortgagers out there, say Wells Fargo, others, maybe I shouldn't say their name. I don't know if they're on our books or not, but
we'll allow it.
The larger ones that are out there, they reach out to us and we provide the servicing to their clients and borrowers. That's the work we do. Yeah, all of the phone calls, the managing the accounts, it all then falls to us.
Okay, so for I have a mortgage through my bank, and they're working with you, right? My bank then comes to you to make sure that all the bills are paid, and is that right?
Correct. You'll pick the phone up or you'll hop on the website. You want to look at maybe your account, reach out, ask about a billing question or other, and we will pick the phone up because we're working for them to ensure that their clients and borrowers are protected, taken care of. Everything happens that needs to. Correct. We're the work behind the scenes.
And it's a big business in mortgage, right? The servicing is kind of a big deal. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the economic purpose of the servicing contracts?
Well, from a contract perspective, I'll have to admit I'm not that closely tied into it. I mean, obviously, kind of the flow of the industry we follow. So if interest rates are low, people are buying homes, there's more work to be done. If not, we're still doing work, but now we're just sub-servicing those loans that are coming through. So it tends to follow the industry, right? The economic kind of landscape of not only the U.S., but the world. We definitely see kind of rise and fall as well in the types of borrowers that come through. So definitely whatever we see out there in the industry, we'll end up seeing here inside of the work we do.
You're on the front lines of you're the canary in the coal mine for how people are feeling about their mortgages and whether they're going to...
The boat in the water, tide goes up, tide goes down. Like, okay, I think it went up. Yeah, that's us.
And so the lenders are really depending on you to be the face to their customers, right? And make sure that those customers are protected. And it's a real kind of a big reputational component.
Oh, absolutely. It's something we take very seriously, right? When they pick that phone up, they don't necessarily know or care who they're talking to, but they know who their provider is. And if we were to do something they don't like, then clearly we're presenting the wrong face to their borrowers and customers. So yeah, it's huge for us, and we take that very seriously.
So your title is CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. That's a big title. It means different things at different organizations. Can you just give us like a quick description of kind of the umbrella of things that you're covering?
Yeah, never thought I would be a CISO, never wanted it, yet here I am, so I'm going to do my best to explain it. All things security, from the way that I look at it, it's my responsibility and my teams to ensure that our infrastructure, our business, our company is protected. And so what that means is we don't want to see our data fall into the wrong hands. We don't want malicious actors to get in.
Right.
We want to protect that data from a governance, risk, and compliance, obviously being in sort of the financial sector, mortgaging, subservicing. We have a lot of records that we want to make sure that we hold on to or protect. And so from a governance, risk, and compliance perspective, the industry's got certain regulations that we have to follow. And so it's very important that we have the controls in place on the infrastructure relating to security that make sure that we meet those regulations. So answering your question, the CISO role to me is all things security, all things governance, all things risk, which really ties back to security. And I absolutely positively want to ensure the company's compliant. We have to be doing the things we're supposed to do, not because we're supposed to, but because we need to, but obviously because we're supposed to.
Well, that's interesting. That's a pretty, that's a broad view, which I think is really useful in the situation you're in, because you are such a highly regulated space, but also dealing with individuals who are maybe paying the biggest bill of their month. And so, I want to talk all about that. However, you did mention, this wasn't your intent to be in this role. Can you tell us a little bit kind of like what your trajectory has been to get into this role?
Sure. I'm going to have to start at the very beginning. I think my first IT job was around 1997, and hopefully nobody's watching this. Just kidding, but my mom got me my job to begin with. She was at a company, and she spoke highly of me. My first interview was an absolute disaster, but they went ahead and hired me. I said, "Are you sure?" They said yes, and it was in a very low-level IT position, which to me at the time, I was hungry. It was perfect. In that company, I'll just say it was Ericsson, I got to work in the help desk, site support, server support, network, and messaging. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. The more you learn, the more you realize I don't know a bit about what I thought I knew. And so you just kind of keep progressing that. So I went from kind of your base infrastructure to then being a leader. Once you become a leader, you have to look at things completely differently. No longer do I just get to make changes on the infrastructure, open and close tickets, and then go home? But if something breaks or fails, it's my responsibility. Now, in a leadership position, I started to look out for the company. And then the more that happens, right, you move on to the next role, and then the next role. And yeah, throughout the course of my career, I've been blessed to work for some high-level companies who are well established in the industry. I'll name a few, Kraft Foods, Cadbury, IBM, Microsoft. It allowed me to see what each and every one of those companies does differently, right? And you think to yourself, okay, these big companies, I bet they're pretty much stamped out, right? I know what I'm doing, stamped, I know what I'm doing. But as we probably all know, every company does something completely different. You walk in the doors and you think, all right, I'm here. What are you doing right? And it turns out maybe it's not what you thought it was. But right,
I'm always like, these guys have it totally figured out. They must.
Oh yeah.
And just like these guys fill in the blank company, and there's gaps everywhere.
Yeah. Where do I put my feet on the desk? Like that's what I thought I'd be doing here. Turns out no, not the case. But you get to learn too, because each company treats their leadership different. Each company communicates different. Right? They all have the same end goal in mind: grow the business, keep it secure, replace infrastructure if it's needed, build the business, right, et cetera, and so on. But everybody does it differently. And I think I don't have any superpowers, but the one thing I always tried to do was pay attention and walk away from an experience thinking, okay, you did this wrong and you did this right. Don't do that. Learn from this. And if you just kind of keep that mental list going, then that next role, it combines the next role. You just can't help but, I guess, see the gaps when you end up at the next place and also find opportunities. And when I landed at Dovenmule, it was almost a perfect scenario for me in that, again, I didn't necessarily think my career would take me here. The opportunity presented itself and I did not back away. I thought, I can do this, right? I'm ready. I didn't want it, but now I see it. I'm ready.
So, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, no.
I was going to say, I'm just trying to picture, day one, you're coming in, you've got your first few weeks as a CISO. This is a different kind of job for you. Like, what were some of the key, one or two things you definitely knew you wanted to do coming in, or maybe one or two surprises in those first weeks?
I had no idea. I didn't know. I really, truly didn't have anything in mind. It was more like I tend to go in investigative mode to begin with. Like okay. I won't know what I know until I at least start digging. And for me, it was talking to people, asking them what they did, what they knew, asking them openly and honestly, you can trust me. I need to know what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, or where do you think we need to grow something. And that doesn't always mean that they give you the right answer, because maybe their purview didn't exist far enough to understand what they did or didn't do well. And so that's why talking to multiple people, right, helps build that combined picture. You can't put a puzzle together with 5 pieces, or you need them all.
Yeah, I love that, because I do want to, I hope the listeners like really take heed of that. It's so, I'm sure at an executive level, and this has happened to me, the people who hire you, the CEOs, they're like, here's what's going on in this department. Here's the problems and here's what we're trying to solve. And it's very easy to get all keyed up to like, I'm just going to drive after that, whatever the boss said. Yeah. However, I kind of always say one of my advantages is I have a lot of friends in low places. I think it's so important to talk to everyone who has a piece of this, and kind of triangulate it. So I love that you're starting with that kind of listening mode.
Yeah, you have to. I think that's the problem, right? What's the old phrase? Listening is not just waiting for your turn to talk. You really need to let it sink in. And I think a lot of leaders have that problem because they come in with, there's sort of that stigma, right? I'm a leader. I'm in this position. I should know what I'm doing. I have a plan. Let's execute. And I've run across those leaders before who will do that without knowing what it means, just because they don't understand your infrastructure or the new infrastructure they've showed up at. And you've got to have some humility, right? You've got to be humble a little bit and say, I don't know what's happening here. Mm-hmm. I know what should be happening from a high level perspective, right? And at the same time, if you don't tell those around you, your peers, leaders, whomever they are, that like we're on this journey together, they don't feel like they're invested, and they will sit back and wait for you to dictate, and that just won't go well. So as part of that learning process, right, you've got to get people to come along with you. Mm-hmm. Because if they do, they're going to see the results as well. And if they don't feel a part of it, nothing's successful, right? We all hear about people, process, technology, and the word people is at the front for a reason.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just kind of thrown in the mix, right? That's just. But I do like what you're saying, right? So you go and you talk to everybody, you get a sense of what are the real challenges, but there is a moment where you do have to sort of make some claims directionally and start doing some things. How did you think about that strategically so that you're truly bringing people along with you, but also meeting the needs of the security needs of the business?
Right. So this is going to feel like I'm in a therapy session to an extent.
Nice. That's what I really solve for in these interviews.
Well, what did I sign up for? Either way, I'm enjoying it. I tend to argue with myself a lot, right? I have a hard time making a decision sometimes. And again, looking back at my past, I've been in situations, either direct participant or from the side, when somebody says, okay, finally, like I hear everything, sorry, final decision is we have to do this. So what I tend to do is gather the info, make the decision, and then say, fine, we have to do this in some way, and then wait for feedback. Because sometimes, right, you're always in that meeting where you say, does anybody have anything before we wrap this up? That's quiet. And you say, all right, thank you very much. And then somebody speaks up, right? It seems like when it's at that very last moment, you will get somebody who wants to talk. And so I always look for that last moment. There's always somebody that's got an insight that's valuable. To answer your question, sometimes you do just need to make a decision. I try to communicate it, but you make the decision collaboratively. And sometimes you're not popular, but I always try to assume that I'm at the same time making the right decision and seeing what that seems like, and I'm making the wrong decision. How would I recover if it was? And you usually find yourself right in the middle of, okay, I've taken all the risks into consideration. I know what we're doing here. Let's go.
It's actually it is kind of a superpower. It's pretty rare for all of us to, even though we all say we want to learn from our mistakes, it's actually very difficult because you have your internal bias and, it's a little easier to be like, oh, this is why I made that decision and kind of brush it off. So truly kind of sitting with something that didn't go well is it's a superpower. I definitely want to underscore that. And I love what you're saying too about soliciting feedback. I'm just going to glom on there and just say like some people are not comfortable raising their hand in a group setting. And so, maybe it's a phone call. to the quiet person. Maybe it's a, hallway conversation, because those people have great feedback, but they're often not in like a place where they're comfortable giving it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
You gotta chip away. I do that too, right? Just schedule one-on-one. Like, I'm just curious, do you have any feedback? You've got experience, etc. Yeah, it takes a long time to get to a good decision, but it's worth it. I'm not opposed to the fail fast. I get it. Been a part of it, heard it. It's out there, but there's not. You can't always fail fast because sometimes those failures are significant.
Well, that's actually a great kind of pivot point in this conversation, because the whole industry, but particularly in the mortgage world, there's risks that if you don't address them the first time, the water's out of the tub. It's a real problem. What kinds of things are you seeing in the mortgage industry, particularly, or more generally for cyber?
Ooh. What I don't like to do is give away information, the things we struggle with, but I think I can answer this question generally.
Oh, yeah. Just imagine we have 100 people who are training to be CISOs. Like, generically, what would you tell them?
Yeah, every company is both the same and different. I mean, truly, right? If you do the basics and you're really good at it, you're protected. Then you look at how you communicate with a borrower. Make sure like that's secure. How's data coming in? How do you email? How do you receive documents? Right? Where's your sites located? How are they connecting? Like all the same stuff, right? Make sure you have endpoint detection and response. Are you logging? If you do the basics, you'll be fine. Where I see this industry struggling from time to time is both from a regulation perspective as well as those malicious actors tend to just go around the circle, right? It feels like they just spin the wheel, and where the arrow lands, it's like, let's attack banking now. Let's attack, right, this now.
Healthcare, right?
Right, and like they were attacking our space for a while. You just have to be diligent. You have to pay attention. But there's a lot of great groups out there, FSISAC, CISA. They will let you know what's going on. There is a lot of fantastic podcasts on a daily basis that will tell you what's going on. In this role, you just have to pay attention. You truly have to pay attention.
Yeah.
I get that I'm not fully answering your question, like how is your industry different? How do you protect it differently? But I have to go back to just do the basics.
Yeah, I like that. Let me kind of reflect back what I think you're saying, because it's really interesting. And if there were 100 people here trying to training for your job, here's what I'm picking out is you're sort of starting with the borrower, the person, right? You're starting with like, what are our touch points to this person? It's the call center, it's the emails, that's the place where you're kind of making your first stand. Like, let's audit this component. And then you're kind of backing up into like your internal procedures, and then kind of backing up from there into like, closer to the iron telemetry and logging and that type of thing. And so to me, that's what I think you're describing as kind of concentric circles of attention.
Yeah. The rings we all talk about, the layered security. If you do the basics right, secure your infrastructure, proper identity management, proper certificates, and ensuring you're securing your data in transit, right, et cetera, and so on. To your point, you make an excellent recap there, which is now focus on what's different than everything else you're taking care of. The borrower. How do I communicate with them? How do I make that transition from communicating to the borrower with that lending institution's data? Because truly it is theirs, and at some point we're just the caretaker of it, right? Mm-hmm. You look at the data. We are no different than anybody else, truly, in my mind, from the businesses I've seen. Sorry, just to tag on to that, I get that it can't always be that easily generalized. Right? There are companies out there that's super specific. I get that, but our industry is very much like everybody else's. Do the basics and you'll be fine.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually I was going to talk a little bit more about how that fits into an overall cyber awareness, security culture, because it's important, I think, to have that kind of checklist of things that you're going to care about in what order, because the volume gets turned way up. Things are pretty dramatic in the cybersecurity world, right? You've got different departments with different worries. Maybe somebody got a matter requiring attention. They got their hand slapped by a regulator. Perhaps there's a breach Go.
You
Right?
said it. You did say the word. I was hoping you
And
would.
people get like really, like there's just a very long laundry list of things, right?
Yeah, it is. It's when you. How do I phrase this? Because if I don't say this correctly, it's going to sound just terrible.
I don't want to make the Christmas party hard for you at the
Right, that's
company.
okay. That's all right. I'm a CISO. They're supposed to hate me. With all the breaches that happen and right everything that you see, it's hard to say I can stay away from that because you've seen some of the larger companies that have been breached, and then you say to yourself, if they can get them, what hope do I have? But then you often find, okay, they forgot to do this one thing. Here was the way in. They left this door open. Like there's part of this that tells you, oh, well, if it happens to me, I'm just going to say, well, did you see the bigger company that got breached? Like, what should I do, right? And then, and I promise I'm getting somewhere with this, then you talk about the regulations that you might fail, the controls that you didn't hit on, you might get a matter needs attention. I'm a firm believer in never, ever, ever try to skirt evidence that you provide in an audit because you will find out immediately what you're doing wrong. They will point it out, and there's no better way to get funding or support or attention on something you know exists than to say we have a matter that needs attention, right? Well, I think there's a lot of people out there that think, oh, geez, I can't have that. It's going to look bad on me. It's going to look bad on our team. It's just the fact of the matter. You can't do everything right. If you do, the business is going to stop because if you secured it so much, it can't move, right? It's in a phone booth now. So there's a lot to be learned from what happens in the industry. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with the regulators, the board, and you just do the best you can, knowing that you're out there in the middle. And sometimes you feel like a fish in a barrel, but you just got to keep swimming.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you kind of like the scale of your organization. Like, do you have like a book of business or how many people serve?
We are north of a couple thousand people. From a client perspective, I don't know if I can say that or not.
But yeah, but it's a lot, basically. It's a lot. I was at Fannie Mae.
Yes, we
And I
consider it
was
a
telling
lot.
you, I was at Fannie, a huge number of borrowers involved and a lot of regulators because you're in finance. And I hope that everyone just kind of rewinds what you just said because regulators understand it's a complex environment. They're not looking for you to be completely, it's not like getting a, good citizen grade in high school. It's a whole complicated process and they know that. So I agree. And I think that transparency also makes you stronger.
Yeah, I want to know.
Yeah.
You
But
have to know. You have
most
to be
people would
comfortable.
say, like, it's not a matter of if, but when. You're going to, right, at this point, because the bad actors are pretty smart. They're getting smarter. Have you given some thought to, like, how bad actors have changed? Some of these fraud trends are changing right now.
Yes, and I hate all of it, how it's changing. They're getting better. Clearly, there's more of them. This whole ransomware, bad actor as a service, let's just say that. I know that doesn't exist, but the
Now,
event of
our audience
AI,
is somewhat technical, but let's talk about ransomware, which is,
ransomware, which is malicious actors got into your system. There's usually two prongs to this attack. They will exfiltrate data and hold that hostage, and then they will use encryption software to lock up your infrastructure and basically say, if you want it back, we'll give you the key, give us the money. And if you hem or haw around and say, well, we already took a bunch of your data, do you want that let go or not? It's just, it's rude. It's just wrong.
it's rude. But, there's nothing more than like healthcare, your money, like things that like your
Yeah,
end users, your borrowers. I mean, there could be nothing more terrifying, right, than
yeah.
not knowing where you are with paying your mortgage.
And I think we're all getting used to it to some extent. I mean, who amongst us has not received a letter in the mail that says, we recently suffered this. Here's the measures you should take. We're giving you credit. Reporting for so long. I think we're all getting a bit immune to it, and we shouldn't. We should be hyper vigilant.
Hmm.
But when you ask about trends, I love AI. I hate writing documentation. I love reviewing it. So it helps from that perspective. But the thing that it does that I feel like it's hurting us is you used to see those phishing emails that just look terrible. You could just tell, like they didn't even try. misspells, wrong caps here and there, and then certainly people would click on it, but it's getting much, much more sophisticated. And with all the additional infrastructure that seems to pop up on the cloud these days, you see a link, you have no idea where it's going. You don't know who's in the middle of it, you don't know who's at the end of it, and they can make it look like it's one of yours. And so that's where I think the trends in the bad actor area are getting more sophisticated, the advent of AI. And then the more people it seems like you get on that bus, the more ideas you get from it. And when you think about ransomware as a service, it could come from anywhere. And the person that sits at the top, they don't care how many people fight over each other to get your infrastructure compromised, because at the end of the day, they're still getting a percentage of it. So now there are more out there trying to attack you. And I think at times they just step over each other, which just means we're getting attacked more.
So you're saying it's easy for them to be better, but also just like you and I might have a subscription to Microsoft Office or AWS, you could subscribe to a fraudster service, right?
Yeah.
As a regular everyday criminal with a laptop. Right?
Yep.
And I guess a lot of phone calls too. I was just reading about this in TechCrunch, like, AI that sounds like a family member or.
Yeah. Voice changing software. Yeah. We heard, what was it, a few months ago, that somebody in another country paid out, was it like $10 million? I could be getting the number wrong.
I saw that, and
CFO CFO got online and said, I need you to do this. And okay.
everyone's busy. It's an emotional thing. They're experts at like playing your worries,
Right.
and getting into your psychology so quickly. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Just to kind of recap, I think what you're saying is like make sure that you are kind of listening to everybody, slow to decision, cover the basics. Like don't get too fancy too quick. Just make sure you eat your vegetables first, and then you can think about like some of the harder things that are coming down your way with a little bit more, comfort, because you have checked all the boxes and made sure that you can control what you can control. That's what I think you're saying. The part we haven't gotten into, speaking of a therapy session that I really want to talk about, is creating a culture of security awareness. And there's kind of two directions I want to talk about. You've got peers and bosses who have an opinion, right? And
Maybe.
sometimes those opinions aren't totally aligned. And I'll give you some examples from my career so you don't have to. Hypothetically, you might have an enterprise risk and audit group that's like, hey, we need documentation on everything, but you know that that's not going to be feasible because you'll shut down your whole business. You're not, right? You're not in the business of audit, you're in the business of servicing. Perhaps you have a line of business lead who's like, I don't want to do any of this because I just want to make my goals and get my bonus, right? So like, how do you kind of coordinate at the executive level? There's people who want like all the security all the time, and then there's people who are like, please get out of my way.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm glad you used a hypothetical from your experience, so I don't have to try to pretend.
I know this doesn't happen to you. I'm sure you guys are completely unified in every way and never have
Every
any.
place I've ever been, it's just been hugs and kisses around. Yeah. It's communication. It really is. Like you can't, we talked about it earlier, you can't kind of sit in your own little ivory tower and say, here are the things I'm going to do. And I've seen people do this where a board member or peer will say, we need this. And you feel like you've got the sense that I've got to deliver. I have no option. Yep. And you don't want to look bad. Yep. I can do it. You can't do that. Clearly, I think
I would totally do that. I really want to zero in on this because I would completely do that. Just immediately jump to say yes. So like specifically, let's say there's somebody new in your role. What do you do in that situation? The CEO's, smiling and shaking your hand and saying like, okay, this is what you're going to do. Do you agree? What do you say?
Let me take a look at it, right? There's always nicer ways to say no than just saying no, which is we've taken a look at this. Right now, it's just not feasible but let's put it down as a risk. And right, here's what I need from you if you want to get it accomplished. Because usually it's, right, there's a lot of tools that you just like make settings. But to your point, if you don't have documentation and maybe you don't have this new security app that's going to protect a certain space and somebody wants it, and it doesn't fit in your organization, you just have to say, like, we can't pull that off. We don't have the infrastructure in place in order to tie those points in. But if you get that for us, oops, sorry about that, then we can accomplish that. like you've got to communicate the reason why you can't do it. Ask them then, right now we're collaborating on the same team. If you partner with me and we can take care of these things, we can do it.
Yeah.
Or I need more people because these other 5 people are doing this. But if we need to take this person off, it's important. Let's just put this other thing kind of on the sidelines for a while. Like you have to keep talking. Even when you feel like you should be quiet, you have to keep talking. And I think it truly is important to explain why you can't do it rather than just say no.
I'm just going to glom onto what you're saying, because a couple of things, if you are earlier in your career, it took me a long time to learn that you do not have to answer when asked at that moment. It's okay to say something sort of bland and kick the can down the road so that you have time to pull the data together to, you've always got time to put your foot in your mouth. You don't have to do it right away.
That's a good point. Huh.
That's how I talk to myself. I'm like, there'll be plenty of opportunities. You don't have to jump in right this second. And the other thing I think so many people forget when they're managing up is those leaders are super busy. They don't remember the last thing you said.
That's a good point, too.
Keep checking in, even though to you feel like I'm just a broken record.
It does feel like the higher you go, the less you start out saying. And then let them fish for more information. Let them ask you to dig in. But they want yes or no's at the tippity top. And then as you get closer to yourself, you feel like I can explain more.
They'll give you a little bit more time.
That's a really good point you made, which is you can always say, that's a great idea. Let me think about that. Get back to you with a possible solution.
From bitter experience, right? That's what I've learned. I'm not as quick a learner as you. It took me a while.
I just say I am, and everybody believes me. It's not true. I learn very slowly.
So we talked a little bit about, it's kind of your peer level and above at the strategic level. You've got a lot of different type of workers in your organization, a lot of people on the phone. It's a tough job. They've got a lot of things to worry about. What are your principles, or how have you rolled out? Because you have to react very quickly sometimes. How have you rolled out new initiatives and created that culture of cyber so that people can kind of keep that on their priority list?
My answers are going to start to seem very boring because you've heard them before. But it truly is just gaining participation through communication. Like you just don't want to roll something out. Like I learned a long time ago that not change management from a technical perspective, but organizational change management is really important. Communicate what you're going to do, get buy-in, get understanding. Like everybody needs to come along with you in the process. And so in order to do that, right, you've got to, again, communicate often. Like, we're going to roll this new thing out. Here's how it's going to affect you. Let's use something that a lot of people did many years ago when you started rolling out multi-factor. Wait, I have to do something extra now? This is stupid. But you've got to make sure they understand how that protects the company and get them to join in from that perspective, walk them through it, get them down the path. The same applies from an organizational perspective, whether it's HR systems, marketing, legal, whomever, whether it's the IT environment. You have to explain to them why you're doing the thing you're doing, and always make sure that they understand that you're not there to clamp down what they need to do to get the business moving or continue to have the business moving. You've got to make sure that they understand and get, we are not going to impact how you do business. We just want to secure how you do business. I learned this from a leader a couple companies ago, a fantastic lady who taught me a lot in security. She's like, we're not here to say no. We're here to find a way to say yes. We have to secure what they need to do. And that doesn't just stop across the departments. That goes down to every single person in the organization. You can't stop what they do. The business stops. You just need to secure what they do.
I like that. It's kind of an essentialism that it's good to remind yourself of, especially in a highly regulated organization. It's easy to kind of start chasing your tail on regulation and lockdown and rules, but the business has to lead, right? That's what business are we in? You have to kind of I find I have to remind myself on the tech side, okay, we're not just here to buy and build cool tech. It has to do the right, right? As much as I would like that to be my job. So it's interesting to hear that. And then I had a question for you, which I don't know how I love what you're saying about communication. However, let me ask you this. How do you know if people are getting it? Because communicating is hard. And it's kind of not done until the other party shows you they got it. Are you, like, let's take multi-factor or something like, are you collecting data from the people in the field? Are you, how do you know they got it?
Yeah, you have to follow up with them. You have to hear it from them, really, because you're right. I mean, I even tell my own team. I hope they're not watching this. You even have to, like, I tell my own team, like I don't know how many times in a row we're doing this, and then sure enough, somebody reach out and say, "Hey, when are we going to do this?" I read something a long time ago. You've got to find not the same way, but at least like 7 different times and ways to communicate to somebody
Oh,
before they
really?
fully get it. It was some crazy number like that, and it just kind of resonated with me that I'm kind of the same way, right? Sometimes I scan emails and I
Oh, yeah.
don't get it. Sometimes I'm listening, but this email came in. I've got to write it. It happens to me too. So I always make sure that either I can see it in the data, like our adoption rate is growing at the rate I want it to. Maybe the help desk calls are syncing at the rate I want them to. And then as well, you just have to have follow-up conversations with people. Like you can never, ever get anything accomplished in one meeting. It just can't happen. And so diligence is the key there. Like follow up, like, okay, this is what we talked about.
Yeah.
I even find that those follow-up emails don't necessarily matter. Like, you have a meeting, you recap
Yeah.
it, you send it out. Just to recap, nobody's going to read that because they're
Nobody
thinking,
does email anymore, and
I
people are
was in the
just
meeting.
overwhelmed. It's not that they're trying to be rude. They're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
There's so many things, you know what I mean? That actually, I think people are pretty grateful if you sit down with them and say, listen, the last time just to remind you, the last time we talked
Yeah.
about this or that, so that they can save face and engage with
That's
you.
huge. That's
You know?
huge too. I don't like to attack people. I do have my limits. I think everybody does, but I try to see it from their perspective as well. Put yourself in their chair for a few hours. Like, how are they adopting this? How are they receiving it? And rather than say, how come you didn't? Like, I noticed that you haven't had an opportunity to. Can I help you get to this point? Like, you could say it 50 different ways. And there's a lot of those ways that they will just shut down. And you can't do it. You just can't
And then
do
you're not getting anywhere. Definitely.
it. Definitely.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about. I feel like I really love your approach. It's very, deliberate. Puts people and listening at the center of your approach. You're saying kind of like, let's start out and control what we can control, right? Let's get it right based on what we know today. I love all that. Switching gears though, there's a lot of new technology and new thought work that's in the cyber and security space. Is there anything in particular? It could be pretty future leaning. Maybe it's not here yet. Is there any particular part of the technology that supports cyber that you're thinking about these days?
Ooh, this one's, again, I mentioned earlier, I'm always on the fence with even my own ideas. I love the advent of AI in like log review, looking for behavior analytics, but I don't trust it enough to let it go yet. Right?
I like that. So just for our audience, like these massive logs are just like a ledger of every click, every phone, everything that happens in the systems, right? And so if you were able to send a bot out to sort of generally make some assumptions, right? Oh, here's some unusual behavior. Here's something to look at. I think what you're saying is I'll take the assist, but I'm not going to let it roll on its own.
Yeah, not yet. And what I do like, though, these new tools usually let you set it in sort of what if mode. They'll let you see what happens if you did it. You've got to do that. But I feel like you've got to sneak up on this new technology. You can't just adopt it and go take a nap. And then this
Well, what does
behavior
sneaking up
analytics.
look like? What does sneaking up look like for you?
The sneaking up is slow, like taking a pilot group of users and maybe saying, like, we're going to do this to you. Pay attention. At the same time, I mentioned a minute ago, there's usually that what if mode. I think they call it something different. You say, if I were to make this setting this way, here's how many alerts it would have closed on its own. Here's how I would have classified them. And you have to not let it run for a day. Usually these models need weeks, if not months. Sometimes you don't have months. But sneaking up on it to me means definitely not turning it on and walking away, but finding every possible way to get yourself in that future position where you can see yourself turning it on and knowing what it's going to do. And I know you can't, but as close as you can get to that as possible is what I like to do. Like I'm confident that when I push that button 2 months from now, here's what it's going to look like because I've taken every measure working up to that to see that it has done that.
Yeah, I think the whole test sequence is going to have to get rethought out. We thought it was all just like, test was just this sort of dusty activity in the background, but I think really it's coming up to the front now that we have these non-deterministic processes. All right. Well, I have two last questions for you before we wrap up. So one is, let's say there's somebody on this call right now, kind of like you, maybe they're in the tech or the networking, different parts of the company, and they're thinking like, I want to be a CISO. Is that something that you would recommend? And if so, like, do they need to go technical? Like, what should I be doing if I'm, in some other part of the company?
Definitely recommend it. And do anything and everything technical or security related. I got this question actually not long ago. Somebody was thinking about heading in this career path, and they were kind of focused on one area of security, like red teaming, for example. And that's almost kind of the last thing you want to start with, but not a bad thing to look at either. So I mentioned earlier, security is so many different things: governance, risk, and compliance. How do you communicate? How do you talk to leadership? How do you know the different vulnerabilities? I could go on and on. Security is this big picture. Any time you can spend in any one of these little categories is going to do you well. So like, don't shy away from a position in governance because you don't think it's sexy. Take it. I've been in governance. I'll learn so much from it that eventually down the road helps you. If anybody offers you an opportunity, take it. Because what I found out in the internet or anywhere, you can learn anything if you just take a few minutes to search for it. Like any security related knowledge that you lack, you can get. Look at different certifications. And I think in the certification route, it's always kind of debated. Is it worth it? Is it just something you say? Make sure that if you take a certification in the security area, you take away way more from studying than you were quizzed on to pass it.
That's
That's really what you're getting from that. You're getting knowledge. You don't have the experience yet. The paper just says you put the time in. I mean, maybe you passed with a 70 and you needed a 70.
I think I have a couple of those certs where I just cracked 60% and moved on.
Right.
I think that's right. It's good. It's a good role for a generalist, actually. So, I do data, you do cyber, like these are concepts that stretch across the whole organization at some point. And so it is good if you like to have your a liberal arts degree in the business, you can understand everything that's going on. It just helps you get the context.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I started off at the help desk. Here I am. So, and I can look back to those help desk days and say to myself, like, I learned something that helps me today.
My mentor at Microsoft when I was there made me sit in the call center, even though I was sort of full of myself MBA. She was like, this is how you learn the product, is you sit there and you talk to customers. And I did it, and she was right. It absolutely
100%.
gives you a totally different perspective. That just changed my whole viewpoint. So I agree with that. As a great starting place. Anytime you're in front of the actual customer. All right. So my last question is, and it's okay if you don't have a specific answer, but, in the cyberspace, you said there's a lot of like resources on the internet and podcasts or, different books maybe. Do you have a couple of recommendations of sources that you have, you like right now?
I definitely, so every morning I listen to the SANS Internet Storm Center Stormcast. I listen to that. We'll look it up.
We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, there's another cybersecurity one. Oh, now you're quizzing me and I can't remember. It's Red. It's Red.
I know they all sound a little the same. They all have similar names, but I hear you saying like the podcasts are a great way of getting like fresh information.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Spend the mornings. They're usually no more than 5 to 7 minutes. Drink a coffee, wake up, listen to it. You find out what happened the day before.
Kind of flip through it real quick.
Yeah. If nothing else, it just keeps your mind kind of focused on what you think you should be focusing on.
That's right. It's so easy to get caught up in everyday tasks and not raise your head up.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, any last thoughts before we sign off? It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. No last thoughts. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate it. It's been a great experience.
Great.
sure.
I'm glad to hear it. And, we'll put some notes in the channel. So if you have anything else you want to add or links, we can definitely do that. Thanks a lot, Art. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.